Grab your favorite beverage. It's time for the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast.
What's up, fantasy freaks and geeks? Welcome to part 2 of the Week 6 episode of the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast. It's Thursday night. Sitting here recording, watching the Thursday night football game, and it is surprisingly a competitive football game. I did not think, I thought this was going to be the blowout of the year, but it's 21-14 right now at the start of the fourth quarter. Pretty fun game so far. We're going to run through all of the AFC home games, obviously excluding this Thursday night game. We got 8 games to go through. And we are going to jump right into it here with the Dallas Cowboys visiting my New York Jets. Cowboys have allowed 180 total yards and 4 touchdowns to Aaron Jones last week. Only had one game all season with over 100 total yards. So that's got to bode well for the Jets and Le'Veon Bell in particular. Le'Veon was the most targeted player on the Jets for the past 2 weeks. The Cowboys allowed the second most receptions and the fourth most receiving yards to running backs. So this is Le'Veon's game here, and with Sam Darnold back, he shouldn't see 9-10 guys in the box like he was with Luke Falk playing quarterback. So the Jets really need Sam Darnold, and he is going to play. Luke Falk was holding on to the ball way too long, and he threw the ball down the field maybe twice the whole game. With Darnold playing, obviously that means that Jamison Crowder is now playable, especially in PPR leagues. Crowder was 17 targets in Week 1 while playing with Sam Darnold. And the Cowboys are also allowing the third fewest fantasy points to wide receivers, but I don't think it matters because I think Jamison Crowder is going to catch 10 balls. So in PPR leagues, he's the man. I would sit him in standard leagues, but I'm going to play him in PPR leagues. Mari Cooper, one of the 6 or 7 players last week with 35-plus fantasy points. He had a huge game, 226 yards. Him and Michael Gallup, who returned from his 2-week absence, he caught 7 catches for 113 yards himself. So both wide receivers had 14 targets. They both had a touchdown. They were both really good. The Jets defense isn't bad against wide receivers, but they're not good either. So, this is obviously something that the Cowboys have been focusing on, and I think you can play both of them. I think you can obviously play Ezekiel Elliott. Zeke with back-to-back games with under 100 total yards, first time since Week 1 and 2 of last year. I don't think it's going to be 3 straight, so play your Cowboys for sure. Jets D, like I said, Jets D is not bad, but it ain't good either. So, speaking of bad defenses, we got Washington Redskins and Miami Dolphins. Both of these defenses are in the top 10 for most fantasy points allowed to all 4 of the offensive positions that we care about in fantasy: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end. Any other time that you'd see this, I would say bet the over, play every single offensive player you can, but these offenses are both so bad that I don't think it really matters. There's one guy to play on this Dolphins team. It's Kenyon Drake, who actually has seen his touches go up over the past couple weeks. But there's nobody else to play on this team. Nobody's all that great. So you can play McLaurin, play Chris Thompson, and I guess play Adrian Peterson in a standard league. McLaurin and Thompson each with 25% of the targets last week. I expect the same thing this week. I know last week 33-7 loss to the Patriots. They were, behind early and they had to throw the ball a lot. But as far as the target share for these two guys goes, I think they're both going to be right there around 25%. 7 targets each for last week. I think McLaurin can easily see another 7-8 targets. Maybe Chris Thompson only sees 5 or 6, but I think you could play both of them for sure in PPR leagues. They should be in this game throughout it, unlike last week. So the running back should see a little bit more work as well, which is why I think it's okay to stick Adrian Peterson in there on a week where we have 4 byes. Titans at the Broncos, another game to bet the under. Last week I bet on the Titans-Bills under and made some money. So this Titans defense is legit, man, and the Broncos defense is really good too. So bet the under on this one for sure. Derrick Henry with 48 touches over the last 2 games. The Broncos allow the 6th most fantasy points to running backs. It's the only position that they're not good at defending. Really not worth playing anybody else in this offense. Adam Humphries led the team in targets last week, caught 4 of his 6 targets in a game where maybe they don't really look to throw the ball outside down the field all that much. Maybe Adam Humphries sees a little bit more targets. Maybe you can get away with playing him in a PPR league. Again, another one of these cheap DFS FanDuel DraftKings players that you can maybe throw at the end of your lineup and maybe get some good value out of them. If there's a weakness for the Titans defense, it's defending running backs catching the ball. Broncos, they have 2 good pass-catching running backs here. The Titans allow the 10th most receptions and the 6th most receiving yards to running backs, so I like both of these running backs. They have a 26% target share so far this season, so I think they'll see plenty of targets this week, and maybe this is the week that we see Royce Freeman break out and have his big game like we saw Phillip Lindsay have last week, 15 carries for 114 yards and a touchdown. Also added another 33 yards, catching all 4 of his targets. I think we can confidently play Courtland Sutton, also, who has quietly put up a legit wide receiver number 1 numbers so far this season. 3 touchdowns in the last 2 games, averaging 7 to 8 targets a game. He's 10th in the league in air yards, catching 68% of his targets, much better than the 50% catch rate that he had last year. So he's improving more and more every week. He's a big guy. He's in an offense that is going to focus on running the ball and taking those deep shots, those play action passes. So I like Courtland Sutton in this game as well. Cincinnati at Baltimore. I got the Ravens coming off of a loss to the Cardinals, and the Ravens coming off of a win against the Steelers. Ravens with back-to-back division games here in the AFC North. Sorry, Ravens D has not been the dominant defense that we thought, and that I certainly thought they were going to be coming into the season. They're allowing the 10th most fantasy points to running backs and wide receivers, making Joe Mixon and Tyler Boyd safer plays this week than I think some people might have expected them to be coming into this year. Tyler Boyd, 2 games this season with 10 catches over 120 yards. Last week he caught his first touchdown of the season. Still with no A.J. Green and no John Ross, so Boyd's target share should remain the same. Is he going to see 14 targets a game like he did last week? I doubt it. The Cardinals' defense is horrible, so I think they were kind of focusing on getting their best player as many touches as they could. So I don't think that's going to happen every week, but I think he will lead the team in targets, and he's going to be the number 1 option there, at least until A.J. Green comes back. And then who knows, even when A.J. Green comes back, Tyler Boyd may finish the season as the number 1 there because, A.J.'s getting older, and he's constantly dealing with nagging foot injuries, leg injuries, everything else. So the Bengals have been absolutely gashed by running backs in the past game so far this year. The most receiving yards, 2nd most receptions allowed to the position. Unfortunately, the Ravens running backs only have a 12% target share. The Ravens don't throw the ball to running backs all that much. But Mark Ingram has caught all 9 of his targets so far this season, so maybe the Ravens use this matchup to try and expand that aspect of their offense. The Bengals also allow the 10th fewest fantasy points to tight ends, but we'll see how they really stack up against tight ends playing this Ravens team that absolutely loves to target the tight ends. Tight ends targeted 40% of Lamar Jackson's passes last week. So this is going to be a good test for the the Bengals defense that is not good against running backs at all. They're not good against quarterbacks. Really, the only thing they have been decent at so far this season is defending against tight ends. So we'll see what that number looks like after this week when the law firm of Mark Andrews and Hayden Hurst and Nick Boyle come into town. We got the Saints going down and playing in Jacksonville, Duval. The Jaguars coming off of a loss to the Panthers, and the Saints coming off of an NFC South Division game win against the Buccaneers. Teddy Bridgewater with the game of his career last week. 314 passing yards with 4 touchdowns. Did have that one pick. But I said last week, and I said 2 weeks ago as well, that Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara would be just fine without Drew Brees. Obviously, they're not going to be the dominant players that they have been, but they're playing great without him. And Teddy Bridgewater, I think, has shown a lot of people, he's not just one of these random backups that comes in and just kind of, manages the game. He's making plays, man, and good for him. He's been through a lot with that horrendous knee injury that he had a couple years ago, and he couldn't have fallen into a better position here. Yeah, it kind of sucks having Taysom Hill there, taking away some touches, but since Teddy Bridgewater has come in and started to play, we haven't really seen as much from Taysom Hill, definitely nowhere near as much as I thought we'd see. So he's playing great, man, and with no Jalen Ramsey, it's not as tough as a matchup as you would think against these Jaguars. That's if Ramsey doesn't play. It's been back and forth for the past few weeks. He wants to be traded. He's missing time because of a back injury. Then he's going to see his child being born, which can't blame him for that. But just can't figure out whether or not he's going to be playing. And for that, you got to figure it's going to be an easier matchup for these Saints players. Looking at the Jaguars, Gardner Minshew and these Jaguar wide receivers have the matchup in this game. The Saints are allowing the 3rd and the 7th most fantasy points to quarterbacks and wide receivers, respectively. DJ Shark and D.D. Westbrook, each with 11 targets last week. Shark with the huge game, 2 touchdowns. He's got 5 so far this season. He's become a must-play, especially with Minshew at quarterback. Minshew, 3 fumbles lost last week. If he can, he's shown the ability to protect the ball, not throwing picks so far this year, but he's been pretty vulnerable to fumbles, and any rookie quarterback is going to be vulnerable to fumbles, but he's got to protect the ball if they want to stay in games here, if they want to be able to run the offense that they want, which is give the ball to the Leonard Fournette and let him beat the hell out of guys and take your shots down the field with these wide receivers. James O'Shaughnessy tore his ACL or his MCL, so he's going to be out for the rest of the season. So you've got to figure those 4 or 5 targets that he was seeing a game is now going to go to these wide receivers, or 1 or 2 of them is going to go to Fournette. This offense is going to run through these 3 guys for the rest of the season for sure. Play Minshew, play Fournette, play these wide receivers, play Michael Thomas, play Alvin Kamara. Should be a fun game to watch for sure. Going up to Cleveland. This offense looks lost again. They were so concerned with getting OBJ his touches. He had 2 carries. He had 1 pass attempt to go with his 6 targets. They kind of forgot that they have to block in order to, get this guy the ball. Their offensive line was horrendous. It was not ready for this 49ers pass rush. Chubb still got his 17 touches in a blowout game, which was good to see. But Odell and Baker both with a lost fumble. Odell on his came on a muffed punt return, and I think it was either late in the 3rd or early in the 4th quarter. I get it. You're trying to get your most explosive player as involved as you can, but it's just weird, man. I don't understand why teams would put how much is he making? 20-something million this year, and you're going to put him back to return a punt in the 4th quarter when you're down 31-3. It's pretty stupid if you ask me. But besides Chubb, who has some competition coming for touches in the next few weeks when Kareem Hunt returns from suspension, I'd be worried if I owned any stock in the Browns except for Nick Chubb. Baker does not look the same as he did last year. The defense has not played like we thought they would play with all that talent that they have. I'd be looking to sell these Brown wide receivers if I could. I'd take anything I can get, to be honest. Moving on to the last two games of the week, we got two AFC West showdown, AFC West home games at least. Got the Steelers going to play at the Chargers. We don't know what's going to be going on with the Steelers quarterback situation. We saw Mason Rudolph get knocked out cold, and then he was being carted off the field, and the cart broke down, which is pretty funny. Seeing a bunch of dudes pushing a cart with a guy laying on the back with the full head, the full bodyboard and everything. I mean, it's not funny when a guy gets hurt, but it's just it just looked bad. Deontay Johnson led the team in targets last week with 8. He was the most targeted player by the third-string quarterback, Devlin Hodges, who came in relief. And he'll start unless Mason Rudolph gets cleared after, going again in concussion protocol. So I think Deontay Johnson is not a bad FanDuel play, particularly. He's cheap. He should get plenty of targets with so much attention going to Juju. And with Jalen Samuels, to miss the next month or so, all those touches that were going to him, he was throwing the ball, catching the ball, running the ball. So you got to figure, those touches are either going to go to James Conner or to these wide receivers. And, I think the Steelers are kind of hesitant to use James Conner in the way that they've used their running backs over in the past few years. Obviously Le'Veon Bell is a world talent, but they absolutely ran him into the ground, and I don't think that the Steelers want to do that with James Conner. So I don't know if I'd expect to see him all of a sudden get 20 touches a game now because, they got a third-string quarterback and their backup running back is hurt, and, they're dealing with some stuff there. But the one player I do love for the Steelers this week is Vance McDonald. You got to figure with a young, inexperienced quarterback, he's going to look to Vance McDonald a lot for those easy completions. And he's got a good matchup, too. The Chargers are allowing the 8th most fantasy points to tight end so far this season. So if you're in a situation like I am where I've kind of been streaming tight ends, just trying to get by until Chris Herndon gets back, and what do you know, he's going to miss this game. Something I missed there while doing the Jets preview is that Chris Herndon will not be playing in this game. He's got a grade 1 hamstring strain, so kind of sucks, but maybe Vance McDonald is a guy that that can step in for you, and in a week where we have 4 buys and tight end is always a position that is tough to come by. Speaking of tight ends with the Chargers, we got Hunter Henry, who could possibly make his return this week. The Chargers haven't put anything in stone yet, but I'm hoping for it because he's in another league. He's the guy that I've been stashing away and just waiting for him to make his return. After 42 targets in the first 3 weeks, Keenan Allen only with 11 targets in the last 2 weeks. Very strange. They've had so many injuries to deal with, and yet their best player, their most consistent player for years, just not being involved. I mean, I get it. The defenses are obviously able to kind of key in on him, but for an offense like the Chargers that's so productive, you would think that they would figure out ways to get him a little more involved, but wasn't the case. Hasn't been the case the past 2 weeks. Hopefully that changes this week. Melvin Gordon returns, and he sees 16 touches, more than I thought he would. I figured he'd be somewhere around 10 or 12. Tied Keenan Allen for third on the team in targets. Austin Eckler still out-touched him because of the 4-catch final drive that he had. Phillip Rivers just dumped it down to him like 4 or 5 times straight in that final drive. So the Charger running backs saw a 63% target share last week. Phillip Rivers loves to target his running backs, which is why I think Eckler remains as a legit flex play. maybe even an RB2 in 12-team leagues. But I don't think we'll see him get another 16-target game like we saw him get last week. But 8 targets a game, sure, yeah. 4 to 5 carries, maybe 6, 7 carries a game, sure. So, don't be so down thinking that with Melvin Gordon back that Austin Eckler is going to lose all of his value. He's still going to be a very good player for you, especially somebody that you probably drafted in, the 7th, 8th round. Moving on to the last game of the week, which I think should be the game of the week, Texans at the Chiefs. This should be an absolute smoke show. Will Fuller with the biggest game of the year last week on 16 targets, 14 catches, 3 touchdowns, 217 yards. It was ridiculous. And of course, he was sitting on my bench in one of my leagues. Yes, I am a moron. I got cute. I decided I was going to play Larry Fitzgerald instead of Will Fuller. For the past few weeks, he wasn't as involved as I thought. He wasn't connecting with Deshaun Watson on those deep passes. That has kind of been his trademark over the past couple of years when he's not hurt. And I thought that was something that was kind of going away from this offense, and couldn't have been more wrong. But that happens from time to time. The Chiefs have allowed a 100-yard rusher in 3 straight games, and it would have been 4 straight games if Josh Jacobs had 1 more rushing yard in their Week 2 game, finished with 99 rush yards. So this run defense is not very good at all. We just saw Marlon Mack last week just beat them down 2-3 yards at a time. The Titans controlled the clock, and I think we're going to see teams try and do that every week against this Chiefs team. Carlos Hyde with 21 carries and a touchdown last week. Second game this year with 20 or more carries. So play Carlos Hyde. Honestly, play everybody in this game. It should be a shootout. I would play any player that I'm rostering that is on either of these teams. Even LaShawn McCoy, who last week only had 2 targets, no carries, and he lost a fumble. Really bad game for him, but I don't think they're just going to, completely get away from him now that Damian Williams is healthy. It should be a split backfield, but we'll see how that works out. Chiefs only ran the ball 10 times besides Mahomes' 3 scrambles. Apparently, Andy Reid was quoted saying that, with the Colts dealing with so many injuries in their secondary, they wanted to focus on throwing the ball, but they didn't look good, man. They did not look good at all. Seems like every single Chiefs wide receiver has at least one huge game this week or this year, and add Byron Pringle to that list. Byron Pringle, who the hell is that? He caught 6 of his 9 targets for 100 yards and a touchdown. So kind of just murking up the field here even more. Sammy Watkins had that big game week 1. Then, Demarcus Robinson and Mecole Hardman have kind of been going back and forth. And now Byron Pringle. And we're still kind of waiting for Tyreek Hill to return. So hopefully if he does this game, if he's playing, if he's active, I'm starting him. I have him in one league, and I've just been patiently waiting for him to make his return. So this should be an awesome game. I can't wait to watch this game. Should be fantasy points galore. So that's going to do it all. Quick little 23-minute episode for you guys here for all the AFC home games here in Week 6. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you check us out next week. And as always, may the fantasy gods be cruel to your opponents.
You have been listening to the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast. For more episodes and information, follow us on social media and tune in every week. Beers and Bruisers is available on Google Podcasts, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Alexa, Reach TV, or your favorite podcast service. Beers and Bruisers is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. To find out more about this and other great shows on our network, Visit us online at hcuniversalnetwork.com or download the free HC Universal Network app today. Fantasy football is fun, but gambling addiction destroys lives. If you or someone you love suffers from gambling addiction, please do not be afraid to seek help. The National Council on Problem Gaming operates a national problem gambling helpline network. Contact them today at 1-800-522-4700. Thank you for tuning in to the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast. Please remember to drink responsibly and always look for your man downfield.